The back alley behind Giuseppe's restaurant reeked of rotting vegetables and broken dreams. Marcus huddled against the brick wall, his military jacket torn but still carrying the weight of honor he'd lost somewhere between Kandahar and the streets. That's when she appeared. Designer clothes torn, blood dried on her temple, eyes holding secrets she couldn't remember. No ID, no phone, no past. Just trembling hands and a voice barely above a whisper. "I don't talk much, but I can cook," she said, staring at his empty soup can. What Marcus didn't know was that those hands had once prepared state dinners, that her forgotten mind held classified recipes, not for food, but for chemical weapons, that powerful people had tried to erase her because she'd discovered their plan to poison an entire city's water supply. Now, as she stirred canned beans over Marcus's makeshift fire, muscle memory began returning. The precise measurements, the careful timing, skills that could save thousands of lives if they could stay alive long enough. But who was hunting her? And why couldn't she remember the one recipe that could stop them? "Lady, you need a hospital, not a cooking lesson," he said, his voice rough from disuse. 3 days since he'd spoken to another human being. She shook her head slowly, wincing at the movement. "Can't. Don't know why, but I can't." Her fingers found the rim of his dented soup can, and she frowned as if trying to solve a complex equation. "This is all wrong. The proportions are—" She trailed off, confusion flickering across her features. Marcus studied her face in the firelight. Mid-30s, maybe. High cheekbones, manicured nails now chipped and dirty. Definitely not from the streets. The kind of woman who belonged in boardrooms or fancy restaurants, not cooking beans in a garbage-strewn alley with a washed-up soldier. "What's your name?" he asked. She was quiet for so long he thought she hadn't heard him. Then, "I don't know." The simple admission hung between them like smoke from his fire. Marcus had seen plenty of broken people during his time on the streets. Addicts, runaways, folks who'd lost everything to bad luck or worse choices. But this felt different. The way she held herself, the careful way she spoke, suggested education, training. Yet her eyes held the same lost look he'd seen in mirrors for the past 2 years. "Mine's Marcus," he offered. "Marcus Rivera. Sergeant, formerly of the 82nd Airborne, currently between addresses." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Thank you for the fire, Marcus Rivera, and for not asking more questions." She rummaged through the plastic bag beside him, pulling out a can of tomatoes and a packet of crackers he'd forgotten he had. Her movements became more assured as she worked, like a pianist returning to familiar keys. She crushed the crackers with precise motions, added them to the beans with the tomatoes, then reached for his water bottle. "Wait," Marcus said. "That's all the clean water I—" But she was already measuring it out. 3 careful counts, her lips moving silently as if following an internal formula. The mixture in the can began to smell like something more than survival food. "How do you know to do that?" he asked. She paused, a crease forming between her eyebrows. "I don't know. I just do." Her voice carried a note of fear that made Marcus's chest tighten. He'd heard that tone before, in the voices of soldiers who'd taken too many hits to the head, who woke up missing pieces of themselves. A car door slammed somewhere beyond the alley's mouth, and the woman's entire body went rigid. The improved dinner forgotten, she grabbed Marcus's wrist with surprising strength. "They're looking for me," she whispered, and now the fear in her voice was sharp enough to cut. "I don't remember who, but I know they are." Marcus felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct he'd thought was buried with his military career. "Who's looking for you?" "I wish I knew." She released his wrist and stared into the fire. "There are things in my head, pieces that don't fit together. A laboratory, men in suits, something about water treatment plants." She pressed her palms against her temples, and recipes, formulas, but not for food. The footsteps outside the alley grew closer. Marcus reached for the knife he kept in his boot, old habits from a different life. The woman beside him had gone completely still, every muscle coiled like she was ready to run. "Stay close," Marcus murmured, surprised by his own words. He'd spent 2 years avoiding human connection, and here he was, ready to protect a stranger who couldn't even remember her own name. The footsteps passed by without stopping, but neither of them relaxed. Whatever had happened to this woman, whoever was hunting her, Marcus realized his quiet life in the shadows had just come to an end. Marcus settled beside her, keeping a careful distance. In his experience, people who appeared out of nowhere usually brought trouble with them. "You said you'd cook for me. I'm holding you to that." She turned then, and he caught something flickering behind her eyes. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. "I wasn't sure you'd want me to. Lady, I've been living on convenience store sandwiches and whatever the shelter serves. Trust me, I want you to." Elena smiled, the first genuine expression he'd seen from her. It transformed her face completely, softening the sharp angles and making her look younger. "I have an apartment. It's not far." The walk took 15 minutes through neighborhoods that grew progressively nicer, which only deepened Marcus's suspicions. Elena moved with purpose despite claiming not to remember anything, navigating the streets like someone who'd walked them before. She paused at crosswalks before the lights changed, turned down side streets without hesitation, and avoided construction zones with the instinct of a local. "How long have you lived here?" Marcus asked as they climbed the stairs. "I don't know." The answer came too quickly, practiced. "The first thing I remember is waking up here 2 weeks ago." The apartment itself was sparse but expensive, modern furniture, high-end appliances, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the city skyline. What struck Marcus most was how lived-in it felt, despite Elena's claims. A coffee mug sat in the sink with rings staining the bottom. Mail was stacked neatly on the counter, some of it already opened. A book lay face down on the couch, a makeshift bookmark holding someone's place. "Nice setup for someone with amnesia," he said, running his finger along the mail stack. The envelopes were addressed to Elena Vasquez. "Your memory come back long enough to pay rent?" Elena's hands stilled where she'd been pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "I found bank statements, automatic payments." She didn't turn around. "I know how this looks." "Yeah? How's it look?" "Like I'm lying." She finally faced him, and the vulnerability in her expression caught him off guard. "Maybe I am. Maybe I'm lying to myself too." Marcus studied her carefully. He'd learned to read people during his tours overseas, who was hiding something, who was scared, who was dangerous. Elena was definitely hiding something and definitely scared, but dangerous? He wasn't sure. She moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, pulling out a cast-iron skillet that showed years of use, selecting spices from a rack organized with military precision. Her hands knew where everything was, muscle memory overriding whatever mental blocks she claimed to have. "What's the last thing you actually remember?" he asked, settling onto a bar stool at the kitchen island. Elena was silent for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. She diced onions with professional speed, the knife work of someone who'd done this thousands of times. "Blood," she said finally. "I remember blood on my hands and thinking I had to run." "I don't know." She resumed chopping, but her movements were less steady now. "That's what scares me most. I'm terrified for people I can't even remember." Marcus watched her work, noting the slight tremor in her hands, the way she kept glancing toward the windows, as if expecting to see someone watching. "What about the blood? Was it yours?" "No." The word came out as barely a whisper. "It was too much to be mine. Someone died, Marcus. Someone died, and I was there, and I can't remember if I caused it or just witnessed it." She started the gas burner with more force than necessary, the flame jumping high before settling. "But I know that whoever's looking for me killed to keep something quiet, and they'll kill again to keep me quiet." Marcus felt the familiar tension settling between his shoulder blades, the same instinct that had kept him alive in Afghanistan. "How do you know someone's looking for you?" Elena pointed to the mail stack with her knife. "Because Elena Vasquez died in a car accident 3 months ago." "You don't remember anything before yesterday?" he asked, his voice rough with skepticism and something else. "Concern, maybe." Maya pressed her fingertips to her temples, searching for something, anything, in the void where her memories should be. I remember waking up in that alley, cold concrete, the taste of blood in my mouth, and then you. She'd been drawn to Jake like a magnet, though she couldn't explain why. When she'd offered to cook for him, the words had tumbled out before she'd even formed the thought. It felt right, necessary even, though she had no idea where the impulse came from. What about this? Jake pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small silver object she hadn't seen him take from her. It was in your coat. Maya's breath caught. The pendant was delicate, expensive-looking, with an intricate design that seemed almost familiar, but touching it sent a jolt of electricity through her fingers, and suddenly the coffee shop felt too small, too exposed. "We should go," she whispered. Jake's eyes sharpened. Why? She couldn't explain the sudden certainty that staying here was dangerous. "I don't know, I just—" The bell above the door chimed, and two men in dark suits entered. They moved with the fluid precision of professionals, their eyes scanning the room methodically. When their gaze landed on Maya, she felt her blood turn to ice. "Back exit," Jake murmured, already rising. His movements were casual, practiced, but Maya caught the tension in his shoulders. They slipped through the narrow hallway past the restrooms, Jake's hand steady on her elbow. The alley behind the coffee shop reeked of garbage and something else. Fear, maybe. Or maybe that was just her imagination. "My truck's 2 blocks north," Jake said, but Maya was already shaking her head. "They'll be watching it. They'll be watching everything." The words came from somewhere deep inside her, knowledge she didn't remember learning. Jake studied her face in the dim light filtering from the street. "You're starting to remember." "No. Yes. I don't know." Maya's hands were shaking now. "It's like muscle memory, but for things I shouldn't know. How did I know about the back exit? How do I know they're looking for me?" Before Jake could answer, footsteps echoed from the other end of the alley, heavy, deliberate, moving toward them. Jake grabbed her hand and pulled her deeper into the maze of alleys behind the main street. His movements were sure despite the darkness, and Maya realized this wasn't his first time running from something, or someone. "There's a shelter 3 miles from here," he said, breathing hard as they pressed themselves against a brick wall. "We can lay low, figure out what's going on." No shelters, no official places. Maya was surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "They'll check there first." "They? Who are they, Maya? What kind of trouble are you in?" She wanted to tell him she didn't know, but that would be a lie. Deep down, beneath the fog of her missing memories, she could feel the shape of something terrible. Something that explained why she'd woken up bloody and alone, why men in expensive suits were hunting her with the patience of people who killed for a living. "I think," she said slowly, "I might have seen something I wasn't supposed to see." A car engine growled to life somewhere nearby, followed by the slam of doors. Jake tensed beside her, his body coiled for action. "Whatever you saw," he whispered, "it was big enough to make them want you dead, instead of just scared into silence." Then the memory was gone, leaving only the certainty that running wasn't enough. Whatever she'd stumbled into, it was going to follow her until someone finished what they'd started in that alley. "Jake," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I need to remember all of it, even if it gets us both killed." He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw him making a choice. The smart thing would be to walk away, to leave her to face whatever was coming alone. But Jake had been abandoned before, left behind by a system that had used him up and thrown him away. "Then we find somewhere safe," he said, "and we figure out who wants you dead." The sound of footsteps was getting closer. "Tell me about the dreams," he said finally. She looked up, startled. "What dreams?" "You've been having them. I can tell. You mumble in your sleep." A flush crept up her neck. "I didn't realize I was keeping you awake." "I don't sleep much anyway." Marcus set down the mug. "But you were saying numbers, long strings of them." Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her temple, fingertips pressing against the skin there. There are flashes sometimes. Not really dreams, more like echoes. Numbers, yes, but also voices. People talking in a room I can't quite see. What kind of voices? Men, mostly. Professional. Like they're discussing business, but... She trailed off, her brow furrowing with concentration. There's something urgent about it. Something wrong. Marcus leaned forward. In the 2 days since she'd appeared outside his apartment building, he'd watched her carefully. The way she held herself spoke of education, privilege. Her hands were soft, uncalloused. She knew her way around a kitchen like someone who'd learned from professionals, not necessity. None of it fit with finding her unconscious in an alley with no identification and a head injury. "Sarah," he said gently, "what if that's not your real name?" The question hung between them. She'd chosen it when the ER nurse asked, picking it out of the air like she was ordering from a menu. Sarah because it seemed simple, safe. But Marcus had caught her hesitating when he used it, that split-second delay of someone responding to an unfamiliar sound. "I don't know," she whispered. "I keep waiting for something to feel familiar, but it's all just empty." Outside, a car door slammed. Marcus tensed automatically, old habits from too many nights when unexpected sounds meant trouble. But when he glanced through the window, it was just Mrs. Chen from upstairs wrestling grocery bags from her Honda. "The doctors said memory loss isn't uncommon with head trauma," Sarah continued, "that it might come back gradually. And if it doesn't?" She met his eyes then, and he saw fear there. Not just of the unknown, but of something specific. Something that lived in the shadows of her fractured memory. "Sometimes I think maybe forgetting is safer," she said. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed against the table. The display showed a number he didn't recognize, but when he answered, the voice was familiar. "Marcus? It's Dr. Reyes. From the ER." He straightened. "Is everything okay? I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. The woman you brought in, where did you really find her?" Marcus glanced at Sarah, who was watching him with growing alarm. "In the alley behind my building. I told you that." "Marcus, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen plenty of muggings, plenty of accidents. The injury pattern on your friend doesn't match what you described." "What do you mean?" There was a pause, the sound of papers rustling. "The head trauma is consistent with a blow from behind, yes, but there are other things. Bruising on her wrists that suggests restraints. Trace amounts of sedatives in her blood work that we initially attributed to pain medication, but the timing doesn't match. I'm saying someone worked very hard to make sure she wouldn't remember anything. And if they find out the amnesia isn't complete..." Dr. Reyes let the implication hang. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because an hour after I ran her blood work through the system, someone from the federal government called asking about Jane Doe admissions from that night. They're coming to review her file tomorrow morning." The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone, his mind racing. Federal interest meant this was bigger than a simple assault. It meant Sarah, or whoever she really was, had stumbled into something that people were willing to kill to protect. "Marcus?" Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What's wrong?" He looked at her, this woman who'd appeared in his life like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. The smart thing would be to walk away, to let the professionals handle whatever mess she'd escaped from. He'd done his good deed, gotten her medical attention. His obligation should end there. But looking at her now, seeing the trust in her eyes despite everything she'd lost, Marcus knew he couldn't abandon her. Not when she had nowhere else to go. "We need to leave," he said, already moving toward the bedroom where he kept his go-bag. "Right now." "Tell me about the flashes," he said without turning around. "The memories. What exactly do you see?" Maya closed her eyes, trying to summon the fragments that had been haunting her. A laboratory, white walls, but not like a hospital, more sterile. And there are computers everywhere, screens showing, I don't know, data streams, numbers cascading down. Someone's talking about subjects and test groups. Subjects? People, I think. But they're referred to like lab rats. She shuddered. "There's a man in a suit, expensive suit. He keeps saying something about containing the breach and eliminating loose ends." Jake finally turned from the window, his weathered face grim. "Anything else? Names? Locations?" That's just it. The memories feel real, but they're like looking through frosted glass. I can make out shapes, but not details. She paused, her fingers finding the small scar behind her ear again. Except for one thing. There's a word that keeps echoing. Lazarus. The coffee mug slipped from Jake's hand, clattering against the formica table and sending brown liquid spreading across the surface. What did you say? Lazarus. Does that mean something to you? Jake's face had gone pale. He grabbed a handful of napkins, mopping up the spilled coffee with mechanical movements while his mind raced. I need to make a call. Jake, what is it? Jake's conversation was brief and hushed. When he returned, his expression was darker than before. We need to leave. Now. Why? Who did you call? Someone who might have answers. He threw a 20 on the table, far more than their coffee and shared sandwich cost. But first, we're being watched. Maya's blood turned to ice. Where? Black sedan across the street. Been there since we arrived, but I thought maybe it was coincidence. Driver just got a phone call, and now he's paying very close attention to this place. Maya risked a glance toward the window. Sure enough, she could make out a dark shape behind the wheel of a car parked under a broken streetlight. What do we do? Back exit. Through the kitchen. They stood casually, Jake's hand finding the small of Maya's back as he guided her toward the rear of the diner. The waitress looked up as they approached the kitchen doors. Hey, you can't go back there. Jake pulled out another 20. My girlfriend's feeling sick. Just need to get to the bathroom without making a scene. The waitress pocketed the money and turned away. They pushed through the swinging doors into a chaos of grease and steam. The night cook, a massive man with arms like tree trunks, glanced up from the grill. You lost. Looking for the back door, Jake said. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. How many people? 2, maybe 3. Been sitting there about 10 minutes. Jake cursed under his breath. They were trapped. He scanned the kitchen looking for options when the cook spoke again. But the delivery truck's still here. Jimmy's having a smoke before his next run. He smiled, revealing gold teeth. Man's always looking to make a few extra bucks for gas money. 5 minutes later, Maya found herself crammed into the cab of a bread delivery truck, the smell of yeast and diesel fuel making her stomach churn. Jimmy, a rail-thin man with nicotine-stained fingers, seemed thrilled by the adventure. Where to, folks? Jake gave him an address across town. As they pulled away from the diner, Maya saw the black sedan's headlights flicker on in her side mirror. But instead of following, it stayed put. They're not coming after us, she said. They don't need to, Jake replied grimly. They know we can't run forever. And now they know we're asking questions about Lazarus. The scar behind her ear throbbed, and with it came another flash, a syringe, a voice saying this won't hurt, and then darkness. She was beginning to think the darkness might have been safer. I found this sewn into the lining, she whispered, glancing nervously at the other patrons. There's something written on the back. Marcus flipped the photo over. In Elena's handwriting were the words, Project Lazarus. They can't know about the side effects. Trust no one at Meridian. Meridian, Marcus repeated, the name triggering something in his memory. That's the pharmaceutical company that's been in the news. Something about a new PTSD treatment for veterans. Elena's face went pale. PTSD treatment? Yeah, they've been running trials. Promising stuff, supposedly. Why? Before Elena could answer, the bell above the diner's entrance chimed. Marcus looked up to see 2 men in dark suits scanning the restaurant. They moved with the controlled precision he recognized from his military days. Not cops, but something else entirely. We need to go, he said quietly, sliding the photograph back across the table. Now. Elena pocketed the photo and followed Marcus toward the back of the diner. He'd noticed the rear exit when they'd entered, an old habit that had served him well in Afghanistan and apparently wasn't useless stateside either. They slipped through the kitchen, ignoring the protests of the cook, and emerged into the alley behind the diner. Marcus grabbed Elena's hand and led her toward the street, but stopped when he heard car doors slamming from that direction. This way, he said, pulling her deeper into the maze of alleys that connected the older part of downtown. They moved quickly but quietly, Marcus using every trick he'd learned about urban navigation. Behind them, he could hear voices and footsteps, but the sounds seemed to be spreading out rather than following their exact path. After 10 minutes of careful movement, they found themselves in a small park several blocks away. Marcus pulled Elena behind a maintenance shed, and they both caught their breath. "How did they find us?" Elena asked, her voice shaking. "Good question. Either they're tracking us somehow, or—" Marcus paused, considering the implications. "Or they knew you'd remember something eventually." Marcus examined the photo more carefully. The man was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confident bearing that suggested serious authority. The laboratory behind them was clearly high-end, all gleaming surfaces and sophisticated equipment. "Project Lazarus," Marcus mused. "In mythology, Lazarus was raised from the dead. If this is about PTSD treatment, maybe they're talking about bringing people back from psychological death? Or maybe it's about something else entirely," Elena said. "You mentioned side effects in the note. What if the treatment works, but causes something worse?" A memory surfaced in Marcus's mind, something he'd heard at the VA hospital during one of his appointments. Another veteran had mentioned being approached about an experimental treatment, something that promised to eliminate PTSD symptoms entirely. The man had been excited about it, said it could change everything for veterans struggling with combat trauma. "Elena, when did you write this note?" She stared at the photograph, her brow furrowed in concentration. I remember being afraid, not just nervous but genuinely terrified, like I'd discovered something that could hurt a lot of people. "We need to find out more about Meridian," Marcus said. "And we need to figure out who you really are. What if I'm someone terrible? What if I'm the one who caused whatever this is?" Marcus looked at her, seeing the fear and uncertainty in her eyes, but also remembering how she'd insisted on cooking for him, how she'd shown nothing but kindness despite her own confusion and terror. "Then we'll deal with it," he said. "But right now, someone wants you dead or disappeared. That tells me you're probably one of the good guys." A distant siren made them both freeze. Marcus peered around the shed and saw police cars moving through the area, their search patterns too organized to be coincidental. "They've got official help," he said grimly. "This is bigger than just corporate security." Elena gripped his arm. "Marcus, what if the treatment is already out there? What if people are already being hurt?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed with a text message. The number was unknown, but the message made his blood run cold. "Stop looking or the veteran dies too. Some secrets are worth killing for." Marcus showed Elena the message. Her face went white as she read it. "They know about you now," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I never should have involved you in this." "Too late for apologies," Marcus said, deleting the message. "Now we finish it." "This place belonged to a buddy of mine," Marcus said, fishing the key from under a loose board on the porch. "He won't be back for months." Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of afternoon light, filtering through yellowed curtains. The air smelled of abandonment and old cigarettes, but it was clean and secure. Marcus did a quick sweep of the rooms while Elena collapsed onto the faded couch, her face pale as moonlight. "We need to figure out what those people want from you," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "And we need to do it fast." Elena's fingers worried the edge of her jacket sleeve. "I keep trying to remember, but it's like grasping smoke. There are fragments, faces, voices, but nothing concrete." "Tell me about the fragments." She closed her eyes, concentrating. "There's a man with grey eyes, cold eyes. He's angry about something I've done. And there's a woman's voice warning me about someone named Blackwood." Marcus felt something click in his memory. "Blackwood. I've heard that name before. Where?" "Give me a minute." He rubbed his temples, trying to pull the connection from the fog of too many sleepless nights and too much alcohol. "Military contracting. Blackwood Industries. They had contracts all over Afghanistan and Iraq when I was deployed." Elena's eyes snapped open. "What kind of contracts?" "Security, mostly. Private military stuff. But there were always rumors about other things. weapons testing, interrogation techniques that weren't exactly legal. The pieces were starting to form a picture he didn't like. If you're mixed up with them, that explains why these people are so determined to find you. Before Elena could respond, Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. When we know where you are, bring the woman to Pier 47 by midnight, or we start killing everyone you've ever cared about. Marcus showed her the message, watching the color drain further from her face. How did they get your number? She whispered. Same way they found us at my place, probably. These aren't amateurs. He stood, pacing to the window to check the street. Everything looked normal, but that meant nothing. We can't stay here. Maybe I should just go to them, Elena said quietly. Maybe if I turn myself in, they'll kill you the moment you're no longer useful. Marcus turned back to her. Whatever you know, whatever you've seen, they're not planning to let you testify about it. Elena buried her face in her hands. I'm so tired of running from shadows I can't even remember. Marcus sat beside her on the couch, close enough to offer comfort, but not so close as to crowd her. Then let's try a different approach. Instead of waiting for your memory to come back, let's force their hand. What do you mean? They want you at Pier 47. Fine, we'll give them what they want, but on our terms. He pulled out his phone again. I know people. Veterans who've been where I've been, seen what I've seen. People who don't trust contractors like Blackwood any more than I do. You're talking about walking into a trap. I'm talking about setting one. Marcus scrolled through his contacts, finding names he hadn't called in years. These people think they're dealing with a homeless drunk and a confused woman with no memory. Let them keep thinking that until it's too late. Elena studied his face. Why are you doing this? You could just walk away. Pretend you never met me. Marcus thought about that for a moment, considering all the easy answers he could give. Instead, he told her the truth, because for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I'm fighting for something that matters, something real. Outside, a car engine rumbled past, and both of them tensed until the sound faded. The afternoon was wearing thin, shadows growing longer across the dusty floor. They had maybe 6 hours before the deadline, 6 hours to turn the tables on people who had already proven they were willing to kill. Elena reached over and touched his hand. Whatever happens tonight, thank you, for believing me when no one else would. Marcus squeezed her fingers gently. We're going to get through this, and when we do, we're going to make sure Blackwood pays for whatever they've done. He just hoped he sounded more confident than he felt. Because the truth was, they were about to go up against an enemy they didn't fully understand, with resources they couldn't match, and time that was running out faster than sand through an hourglass. You sure about this place? He asked, though they'd already discussed it twice during the 40-minute drive. Sarah adjusted the baseball cap she'd found in his glove compartment, tucking the last wisps of her dark hair underneath. It's public enough that they won't try anything obvious, but not so busy that we'll stand out. She paused, studying his profile. You don't have to come in with me, Marcus. This isn't your fight. He turned to look at her, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the way her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the door handle. Like hell it isn't. We're in this together now. The bell above the diner's door chimed their arrival, drawing lazy glances from the handful of early morning customers. A trucker hunched over coffee at the counter, 2 construction workers sharing a plate of hash browns, and an elderly woman working a crossword puzzle in the corner booth. Normal people living normal lives, blissfully unaware that death had just walked through the door. They chose a booth near the back exit, sliding across cracked vinyl seats that had seen better decades. A waitress with tired eyes and comfortable shoes approached, pouring coffee without being asked. What can I get you folks? Just coffee for now, Marcus said, earning a skeptical look that suggested lingering customers weren't particularly welcome during the breakfast rush. When they were alone again, Sarah pulled out the burner phone they'd bought at a gas station 20 miles back. Her fingers hesitated over the keypad as she stared at the number she'd written on a napkin. What if he doesn't remember me? She whispered. Then we'll figure out another way. Marcus reached across the table, covering her hand with his. But something tells me you're not the kind of person people forget easily. She dialed before she could lose her nerve. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, a gravelly voice answered. "Yeah?" Sarah's breath caught. Something about the voice tugged at the edges of her memory, like a song she couldn't quite place. "Is this David Chen?" A long pause. "Who wants to know?" I think we used to work together. At Meridian Biosystems. My name is—" She faltered, realizing she still didn't know her real name. "I think you might know me as Elena Vasquez." The silence stretched so long she wondered if he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Jesus Christ, Elena? They told me you were dead." The words hit her like a physical blow. Dead. Someone had reported her death, had written her out of existence while she wandered the streets with no memory of who she'd been. "I need to see you," she managed. "It's about the project, about what really happened." "No, absolutely not. Do you have any idea what you're asking?" His voice rose, panic bleeding through. "They killed Richards. They killed Morrison. And now you call me out of the blue like some goddamn ghost? David, please. I don't remember anything. I need to know what we were working on. What was so important that—" "You don't remember?" The fear in his voice shifted to something else. "Confusion. The accident. They said there was an explosion in Lab 7, that you were caught in it." There was no accident. The words came from somewhere deep inside her, a certainty that surprised them both. "They tried to kill me. And now they're trying to finish the job." Another long pause. She could hear him breathing, could almost feel him weighing the risks. "Where are you?" Sarah gave him the diner's address, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'll be there in an hour. But Elena, if this is some kind of setup, if they got to you somehow—" "It's not." She looked across the table at Marcus, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I just need the truth." "The truth?" David laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth is what got everyone else killed. But I suppose you have a right to know what you died for." The line went dead. Sarah set the phone down with shaking hands, staring at her reflection in the black coffee. Somewhere in this city was a man who held the keys to her past, who could tell her why people were willing to kill to keep her silent. Marcus squeezed her hand. "You okay?" She looked up at him, this man who'd risked everything for a stranger, who'd chosen to stand with her against shadows and lies. "Ask me again in an hour." Outside, the sun crept higher, burning away the morning mist, but the shadows seemed to linger, waiting. The abandoned warehouse smelled of rust and decay, but it was the closest thing to safety Marcus could find. He guided Elena through the broken doorway, his hands steady on her elbow as she stumbled over debris. The adrenaline from their escape was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion and the crushing weight of questions neither could answer. "We can't stay here long," Marcus said, checking the boarded windows for gaps that might betray their presence. "They'll expand their search radius soon enough." Elena sank onto a stack of rotting pallets, her shoulders trembling. The composed woman who had faced down armed men in the diner was cracking, pieces of her carefully maintained facade falling away like paint from these crumbling walls. "I keep seeing flashes," she whispered, pressing her palms against her temples. "Images that don't make sense. A laboratory, people in white coats, and pain. So much pain." Marcus knelt beside her, recognizing the signs of trauma he'd seen in too many soldiers. "Don't force it. Sometimes the mind locks things away for good reason. But what if those memories are the key to stopping this? What if people die because I can't remember?" Her voice broke on the last word. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed. The number was unknown, but something told him to answer. His finger hesitated over the screen before he accepted the call. "Marcus Rivera." The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. "Who's asking?" "Someone who knows what Elena is running from, and someone who might be able to help if you're willing to listen." Marcus met Elena's eyes. She nodded, having heard enough to understand. "We're listening," he said. "Not over the phone. Too risky." There's a 24-hour laundromat on Crenshaw Boulevard, 3 blocks north of the warehouse you're hiding in. Marcus's blood chilled. How do you... 30 minutes. Come alone, or Elena dies within the week. The line went dead. Elena was staring at him with a mixture of hope and terror. Someone wants to meet, Marcus said. Claims they can help. It's a trap. Elena stood, pacing the small space like a caged animal. I won't let you walk into danger because of me. I've already cost too many people too much. What do you mean? The words came out sharper than Marcus intended. She stopped moving, her back to him. I remember fragments. A man named Dr. Patterson. He was trying to help me, and then he was gone. The news said car accident, but I know better. People around me disappear, Marcus. They disappear or they die. Marcus studied her profile in the dim light filtering through the boards. What were you involved in, Elena? What's worth killing for? I think... She turned to face him, tears tracking down her cheeks. I think I was part of something terrible. An experiment, maybe. Or worse. And I think I ran, but not before I learned something that could destroy very powerful people. The weight of her words settled between them like a physical presence. Marcus had seen government cover-ups during his tours overseas, had witnessed the lengths powerful people would go to protect their secrets. But this felt bigger, more personal. Then we meet this contact, he said finally, but we do it smart. 25 minutes later, Marcus approached the laundromat alone, leaving Elena hidden in an alley with clear sight lines and an escape route. The fluorescent lights inside cast harsh shadows through the windows, and only one person occupied the space, a middle-aged woman in scrubs who looked like she'd just finished a hospital shift. She didn't look up when he entered, just continued folding clothes with mechanical precision. Dr. Sarah Chen, she said without preamble. I worked with Elena before her mind was wiped. Marcus felt the world shift. Wiped? What kind of testing? The kind that turns people into weapons. Elena wasn't just a test subject, Mr. Rivera. She was their most successful prototype. Dr. Chen's hands stilled on the laundry, and now that her memories are starting to return, they'll do anything to stop her from remembering what she's truly capable of. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. Elena's impossible reflexes at the diner, her uncanny ability to read people and situations, the way she moved with lethal grace despite claiming no memory of training. What is she? Marcus asked. Dr. Chen met his eyes with grim certainty. She's an assassin, Mr. Rivera, the most effective killer they ever created, and she's starting to remember. The abandoned warehouse felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus crouched behind a stack of moldy cardboard boxes, his military training flooding back as he surveyed their surroundings. The building reeked of rust and decay, but it provided the cover they desperately needed. Beside him, Elena sat with her knees drawn up, her face pale in the thin moonlight filtering through broken windows. We can't stay here much longer, Marcus whispered, checking his watch. They'll expand their search radius soon. Elena nodded, but her attention seemed focused elsewhere. Since finding the laboratory documents in the storage unit, something had shifted in her demeanor. The fragments of memory were coming faster now, like pieces of a shattered mirror reassembling themselves in painful flashes. I remember the taste, she said suddenly, her voice barely audible. Metal. Always metal in my mouth when I woke up. Marcus turned to study her profile. Woke up from what? The procedures. The words came out flat, matter-of-fact, which somehow made them more chilling. They would sedate me, and when I came to, there was this metallic taste, and Dr. Vance would be there, taking notes on his clipboard. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Dr. Richard Vance? Elena's head snapped toward him. You know him? Marcus felt his chest tighten. He was the lead psychiatrist at the VA hospital where I was treated, the one who prescribed the medication that nearly killed me. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Elena, what if this isn't random? What if we were both part of something bigger? Before she could respond, the distant sound of car engines cut through the night air, multiple vehicles moving slowly, methodically. Marcus grabbed Elena's hand and pulled her deeper into the warehouse, weaving between rusted machinery and debris. There, he pointed to a service ladder leading to a maintenance catwalk near the ceiling. "We go up." They climbed in silence, every creak of metal seeming to echo like thunder. From their elevated position, they could see flashlight beams sweeping through the warehouse below. At least 6 figures moved through the space with military precision, their faces hidden behind tactical gear. Elena gripped the catwalk railing so tightly her knuckles went white. "They're not police," she breathed. "No," Marcus agreed grimly. "They're not." One of the searchers stopped directly below them and spoke into a radio. "Building 7 is clear, moving to Building 8. As the team filed out, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. The lead figure paused at the doorway and looked up, scanning the catwalks with night vision goggles. For a moment, Marcus was certain they'd been spotted. Then the man turned and disappeared into the night. They waited 20 minutes before climbing down. Marcus knew they had bought themselves time, nothing more. Outside, the first hints of dawn were painting the horizon grey. "We need to get to the media," Elena said as they made their way to the rear exit. "If we can expose what they did—" "With what proof?" Marcus interrupted. "Those documents could be fabricated for all anyone knows. We need more." Elena stopped walking. "There is more." Marcus turned back to face her. In the growing light, he could see something had changed in her expression. A terrible clarity had settled over her features. "I remember where the main facility is," she said. "Not just the lab where they kept me, but the central hub, where they coordinate everything." She paused, swallowing hard. "Where they keep the other subjects." "Other subjects?" "I wasn't the only one, Marcus. There were dozens of us. Different programs, different experiments. Veterans, civilians, people who wouldn't be missed." Her voice cracked. "People like us." The weight of revelation settled over them like a shroud. Marcus thought of all the homeless veterans he'd known over the years, the ones who had simply vanished without explanation, the missing persons reports that were never properly investigated, the convenient overdoses and suicides. "How many?" he asked. "I don't know, but I know where to find out." Elena met his eyes. "The facility is 2 hours north of here, disguised as a private research hospital. I can see it clearly now. The layout, the security, everything." Marcus studied her face, seeing both determination and terror warring in her expression. "Elena, if you're right about this place, if it's as big as you think, then going there would be suicide." "Maybe," she agreed. "But it's also the only way to stop them, and the only way to save whoever else they're holding." A car door slammed somewhere in the distance, reminding them that their pursuers were never far away. Marcus looked at Elena, seeing in her the same desperate courage that had driven him through 3 tours of duty. Sometimes the most dangerous path was the only honorable one. "All right," he said finally. "But we do this smart. We plan it right." Elena nodded, and together they disappeared into the breaking dawn. The abandoned warehouse smelled of rust and decay, but it was the best cover Marcus could find on short notice. Sarah sat cross-legged on an old shipping crate, her laptop balanced precariously on her knees as she scrolled through the files they'd downloaded from Blackwood Industries. The glow from the screen cast eerie shadows across her face, highlighting the exhaustion that had settled in her features. "There," she said, pointing at a series of transactions. "Look at these payments. Every single one corresponds to a date when someone connected to the research went missing or died." "That's when I escaped," Sarah whispered. "The date I woke up in the hospital with no memory." The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Blackwood Industries wasn't just covering up failed experiments, they were systematically eliminating anyone who could expose their illegal human trials. Sarah had been their star subject, the one who'd survived what others couldn't, but she'd also become their greatest liability. A distant sound made Marcus freeze. Car engines, multiple vehicles, moving slowly through the industrial district. He grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her behind a stack of pallets. "Kill the laptop," he whispered. Sarah snapped it shut, plunging them into darkness. Through the grimy windows, headlight beams swept across the warehouse walls like searchlights. Marcus counted at least 4 vehicles, maybe more. Too many for a random patrol. "How did they find us?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. Marcus was wondering the same thing. They'd been careful, avoided main roads, paid cash for everything. Unless... He pulled out his phone and stared at the screen. The burner phone he'd bought should have been untraceable, but nothing was impossible for an organization with Blackwood's resources. The car engines stopped. Doors slammed in the distance, followed by the crunch of footsteps on gravel. Marcus estimated at least 8 people, moving with military precision. Professional hunters. "We need to move. Now." They crept toward the back of the warehouse, Sarah clutching the laptop against her chest. The building was a maze of machinery and storage areas, providing cover, but also countless places where they could get trapped. Marcus led them through the shadows, his eyes adjusting to the darkness, every sense heightened. A voice echoed from the front entrance, calm and authoritative. "We know you're in there. This doesn't have to end badly. We just want to talk." Marcus recognized the tone, the false reasonableness of someone accustomed to being obeyed. He'd heard it from corrupt officers, from politicians who thought their rank made them untouchable. It never meant anything good. They reached a loading dock at the rear of the building. The metal door was locked, but Marcus had dealt with worse. He pulled out his knife and worked at the mechanism while Sarah kept watch. Her breathing was shallow, controlled, but he could feel the tension radiating from her. "Marcus," she whispered, "what if they're right? What if I really am dangerous?" The lock gave way with a soft click. Cool night air rushed in through the crack as Marcus eased the door open. The loading area was empty except for a few abandoned trucks, but beyond that lay open ground, too much exposure. Behind them, flashlight beams cut through the warehouse interior. Their pursuers were moving systematically, checking every hiding spot. Military efficiency, just as Marcus had feared. "There's a drainage tunnel about 50 yards north," Marcus said, scanning the area. "We make a run for it. Stay low and—" The laptop in Sarah's arms suddenly chimed. Both of them froze as the sound echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. Sarah's face went pale as she realized what had happened. "Automatic backup," she breathed. "The files are uploading to a cloud server." The footsteps inside the warehouse stopped. Then they heard running, lots of it, heading straight for their position. Marcus grabbed Sarah's hand and burst through the loading dock door. They sprinted across the open ground as shouts erupted behind them. A spotlight blazed to life, catching them in its harsh glare. "Stop!" The voice was closer now, no longer pretending to be reasonable. Sarah stumbled but kept running. The laptop clutched against her chest like a lifeline. The drainage tunnel was just ahead, a dark mouth in the concrete embankment. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder. The abandoned warehouse loomed against the night sky like a broken promise. Marcus pressed his back against the cold brick wall, feeling Elena's trembling hand in his. 3 blocks behind them, the sound of approaching vehicles grew louder, their headlights sweeping the industrial district like predatory eyes. "There," Elena whispered, pointing to a gap in the chain-link fence. "We can get through." Marcus squeezed through first, the rusty metal scraping against his jacket. Elena followed, her breath coming in short bursts that crystallized in the frigid air. They'd been running for 6 hours straight, ever since Dr. Morrison's lab had exploded in a ball of orange flame that lit up half the city. Inside the warehouse, moonlight filtered through broken skylights, casting everything in silver shadows. Shipping containers stood like monoliths throughout the cavernous space, their sides marked with faded logos from companies that had probably ceased to exist years ago. "We need to call the police," Elena said, collapsing against a concrete pillar. Blood from a cut on her forehead had dried in a dark line down her cheek. Marcus shook his head. "Morrison said they had people everywhere. How do we know who to trust?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "Trust? I can't even trust my own memories. Half of what I remember could be implanted, manufactured." She touched the spot behind her ear where they'd found the tiny scar. "What if I'm not even who I think I am?" "You're real enough to bleed," Marcus said, kneeling beside her. He pulled out a clean bandana and gently dabbed at the cut. "You're real enough to have saved my life back there." The sound of car doors slamming echoed from outside. Marcus froze, his hand still pressed against Elena's forehead. Through the grimy windows, he could see flashlight beams moving across the parking lot. "They've found us," Elena breathed. "Marcus Chen!" The voice boomed through the warehouse, amplified by a megaphone. "We know you're in there. Bring out the woman, and we'll let you walk away." Elena grabbed his arm. "Don't even think about it." "I wasn't," he said, but the lie tasted bitter. These people had killed Morrison without hesitation. They'd burned down the lab with them still inside it. Elena was right to be afraid. They reached the far end of the warehouse, where a rusty fire escape climbed toward the roof. Marcus tested the first rung. It held his weight. Above them, the metal stairs disappeared into darkness. "I remember something," Elena whispered suddenly. "A room with white walls, men in suits asking me questions about my father's research. They kept showing me photographs, trying to make me remember things I'd forgotten." Marcus paused on the ladder. "What kind of research?" "Chemical compounds. Something about memory manipulation and behavioral control." Her voice cracked. "I think my father created something terrible, and they used me to perfect it." A flashlight beam swept across the container below them. Marcus pulled Elena up onto the next platform, his muscles screaming from exhaustion. They were only halfway to the roof when the warehouse doors burst open. "Spread out," someone shouted. "Check every container." Elena stumbled, her foot catching on a loose bolt. The sound of metal hitting concrete echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. Below them, the flashlight beams immediately swung in their direction. There, the fire escape. Marcus grabbed Elena's hand and they climbed faster, taking the steps 2 at a time. Behind them, boots thundered across the warehouse floor. A gunshot rang out, the bullet sparking off the metal railing inches from Marcus's head. They burst through the roof access door into the cold night air. The city spread out below them, a maze of lights and shadows. In the distance, Marcus could see the harbor, where freight ships moved like sleeping giants through the black water. "The next building," Elena panted, pointing to a lower rooftop about 10 feet away. "Can you make that jump?" Marcus nodded, though his legs felt like rubber. He backed up, took a running start, and leaped across the gap. For a moment he was flying, the alley yawning below him like an open mouth. Then his feet hit concrete and he rolled, absorbing the impact. Elena hesitated at the edge, fear written across her face. "I can't," she called out. "Yes, you can." Marcus extended his arms. "I'll catch you." The roof access door behind her exploded open. 3 men in dark suits emerged, weapons drawn. Elena closed her eyes and jumped. For a heartbeat, she hung suspended between buildings, between her forgotten past and an uncertain future. Then Marcus caught her, and they were running again, across rooftops and down fire escapes, 2 shadows fleeing through a city that suddenly felt like enemy territory. The abandoned warehouse smelled of rust and decay, but it was the safest place Marcus could think of. 3 miles from the city center, surrounded by empty lots and forgotten industrial buildings, it offered the kind of anonymity they desperately needed. Sarah sat on an overturned crate, her face pale in the dim light filtering through grimy windows. "Tell me again what you remembered," Marcus said, checking the entrance for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Sarah pressed her fingers to her temples, the laboratory, white coats everywhere. "And Dr. Chen, I can see his face clearly now. He was arguing with someone about the trials being too dangerous, about people dying." She looked up at Marcus. "I think I was one of the test subjects." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The pieces were falling into place in ways he wished they wouldn't. What kind of trials? Memory manipulation. They were trying to create selective amnesia, the ability to erase specific memories while leaving others intact. Military applications, they called it. Her voice grew stronger as more fragments surfaced. Soldiers with PTSD, prisoners of war, even their own operatives who knew too much. The implications hit Marcus like a freight train. Jesus, Sarah. If they were testing on people without consent. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We know where you are. Return the girl and walk away. Last warning." He showed Sarah the message. She read it twice, her face hardening with each word. "They're not going to stop," she said. "No, they're not." Marcus deleted the message and turned off the phone. "But we're not defenseless. Tommy said he'd have information for us by tonight. And Detective Rivera is probably being watched," Sarah interrupted. "Anyone we've contacted is compromised now." A sound outside made them both freeze. Footsteps on gravel, trying to be quiet but failing. Marcus motioned for Sarah to move behind a stack of old machinery while he crept toward the window. 3 black SUVs were parked outside, and figures in tactical gear were positioning themselves around the building, professional, coordinated, and armed. "Back exit," Marcus whispered. "Now." They moved through the warehouse, weaving between rusted equipment and fallen beams. The back door was their only chance, but as they approached it, Marcus saw more figures taking position outside. Surrounded, he breathed. Sarah grabbed his arm. "There." She pointed to a maintenance ladder leading to an upper level, the roof access. They climbed quickly, Marcus's war-trained muscles remembering the urgency of tactical movement. Behind them, the warehouse's main entrance exploded inward with a crash of splintering wood and shouted commands. On the roof, they stayed low, moving toward the edge that faced an adjacent building. The gap was maybe 8 feet, manageable if you were desperate enough. "I can't make that jump," Sarah said, looking at the distance. "You can. I'll go first, then help you across." Marcus backed up, took a running start, and leaped. His feet hit the opposite roof hard, sending a shock through his knees, but he rolled and came up safely. He turned back to see Sarah hesitating at the edge. "Trust me," he called softly. She nodded, took her own running start, and jumped. For a terrifying moment, she was airborne over the alley below. Marcus caught her arms as she reached the edge, hauling her up and over. Behind them, shouts erupted from the warehouse roof as their pursuers discovered the escape route. They ran across 3 more rooftops before finding a fire escape that led down into an alley. At street level, they blended into the evening foot traffic, just 2 more people hurrying through the urban maze. "Safe house," Marcus said. "I know a place." They walked for 20 minutes, taking random turns and doubling back twice to ensure they weren't followed. The place Marcus had in mind was a small apartment above a Vietnamese restaurant, owned by a veteran who understood the value of no questions asked. As they climbed the narrow stairs, Sarah said, "Marcus, there's something else I remembered, about why they want me back so badly." He unlocked the apartment door and ushered her inside. "What?" Marcus stared at her. "Your father did this to you." "I found out about the unauthorized human trials. I was going to expose everything." She sat heavily on the small couch. "He erased my memory to protect himself and the program, but something went wrong. The process was incomplete. And now you're remembering everything," she said, "including where he keeps the evidence that could bring down the entire operation." "They're not just looking for us anymore," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant chaos. "They're cleaning house." Marcus nodded grimly. The explosion at Dr. Vance's clinic had been meant to silence them all permanently. Only Elena's inexplicable instinct to bolt moments before the blast had saved their lives. Now Vance was dead, along with any chance of recovering Elena's memories through conventional means. "The files you grabbed," Marcus said, gesturing to the singed folder clutched in Elena's hands. "What did you see?" Elena's fingers trembled as she opened the folder. In the dim light filtering through broken windows, Marcus could make out medical charts, brain scans, and documents bearing official seals. Elena's breath caught as she stared at a photograph paper clipped to one of the reports. "That's me," she said, but her voice carried a strange note of uncertainty. "But I look different." Marcus leaned closer. The woman in the photograph shared Elena's features, but something was off. The eyes held a coldness that Elena's never had, and there was a surgical scar visible at the hairline that Elena didn't possess. The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus felt his stomach drop as the implications crashed over him. "Elena, I'm not who I thought I was." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm not even Elena, am I? That's just what they called me after." Marcus reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Through the broken windows, the sound of helicopters grew louder. Searchlights began sweeping the warehouse district in methodical patterns. "We need to move," Marcus said, but Elena remained frozen, staring at the files. "Listen to this," she continued reading. Subject 7 was a former intelligence operative specializing in wet work. After capture, she underwent experimental memory reconstruction to create a compliant asset. The procedure exceeded expectations, producing a subject with no recollection of her previous skills or affiliations. "Elena, we can talk about this later. My name was Sarah Chen." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I was an assassin, Marcus. They captured me and scrambled my brain to turn me into their puppet. But something went wrong, didn't it? I escaped before they could use me." The searchlight swept across their window, forcing them both to duck. Marcus grabbed Elena's arm. "Whatever you were before doesn't matter. What matters is who you are now." "How can you say that?" Elena's voice rose dangerously. "I've been living a lie. Everything I thought I knew about myself is real," Marcus interrupted. "The woman who found me under that bridge, who cooked for me, who risked everything to help a stranger, that's real. They might have taken your memories, but they couldn't take your soul." Elena stared at him, searching his face in the darkness. Slowly, she nodded. "The other files mention a Dr. Reeves. He was the lead researcher before he disappeared 6 months ago. If he's still alive, he might be able to reverse what they did to you, or tell us why they're so desperate to get me back." The helicopter sounds grew deafening as multiple aircraft converged on their position. Through gaps in the walls, Marcus could see armed figures surrounding the warehouse. They had perhaps 2 minutes before the net closed completely. Elena stood, shouldering the file folder. Something had changed in her posture, her movements, a fluidity that hadn't been there before, as if reading about her past had awakened muscle memory. "There's a storm drain in the basement level. I saw it when we came in." Marcus didn't question how she could have noticed something he'd missed, or how she seemed suddenly certain of the building's layout. Instead, he followed her through the maze of rusted machinery and debris toward a stairwell he hadn't even realized existed. As they descended into the bowels of the warehouse, Elena spoke without looking back. "Dr. Reeves has a daughter. According to these files, she was his motivation for disappearing. The address is in Berkeley. That's 300 miles north. Then we better get started." Behind them, the warehouse filled with the sound of boots and shouted orders. Elena found the drain access and yanked the heavy cover aside with surprising strength. The dark tunnel beyond promised escape, but Marcus knew it also led them deeper into a conspiracy that had already claimed too many lives. As sirens screamed overhead and searchlights probed the shadows, they disappeared into the underground darkness, carrying with them the terrible knowledge that Elena's forgotten past might be the key to their survival or their destruction. The abandoned warehouse reeked of rust and decay, but Marcus had chosen it carefully. Multiple exits, clear sightlines, and far enough from the city center that screams wouldn't carry. Sarah pressed herself against a concrete pillar, her breathing shallow as footsteps echoed through the cavernous space. "I know you're in here." Victor's voice bounced off the walls, distorted and menacing. "Dr. Chen, you've caused enough trouble. Time to come home." Sarah's hands trembled as fragments of memory crashed through her mind like breaking glass. The laboratory, the injections, Victor's face above her as consciousness faded. She remembered now, remembered everything. Marcus appeared beside her, moving silent as smoke. His military training had kicked in the moment they'd entered the warehouse, transforming him from broken veteran to lethal predator. He pressed a rusted pipe into her hands and pointed toward the rear exit, mouthing "Go." She shook her head violently. They'd come this far together, she wouldn't abandon him now. "Dr. Sarah Chen," Victor called out, "closer now. You created something beautiful. Neural pathway manipulation, selective memory erasure. Your work could revolutionize interrogation, eliminate PTSD, reshape society itself. Don't let squeamishness destroy your legacy." The memories were flooding back faster now. She'd been idealistic once, believing her research could heal trauma, help soldiers like Marcus. But the funding had come with strings, dark, bloody strings that led to black sites and disappeared dissidents. A shadow moved between the machinery 30 feet away. Victor wasn't alone. Marcus caught her eye and held up 3 fingers, then pointed in different directions. They were surrounded, but he'd expected that. He'd been planning for this moment since they'd left the safe house, knowing it would come down to a final confrontation. "The test subjects were volunteers," Victor continued, his voice now coming from directly ahead. "Prisoners, mental patients, homeless individuals who wouldn't be missed. You helped us perfect the process, Sarah. Every injection, every calibration, you were there." Sarah's stomach lurched as the suppressed memories crystallized. She had been there, hadn't she? At first believing the lies, then growing suspicious, finally trying to destroy her own research when she'd learned the truth. That's when they'd used her own technology against her, scrambling her memories, dumping her on the streets like human garbage. Marcus suddenly burst from cover, his movements fluid and deadly. The pipe in his hands connected with an operative's skull before the man could raise his weapon. Sarah heard the sickening crack, saw the body drop. "Run!" Marcus shouted, already moving toward the next threat. But Sarah was done running. The research existed in her mind, every formula, every breakthrough, every horrific application. As long as she lived, they'd never stop hunting her. And now they'd kill Marcus too, this good man who'd shown her kindness when she'd had nothing. She stepped into the open space between the machines. "I'm here, Victor." He emerged from the shadows like a spectre, flanked by 2 remaining operatives. His silver hair was perfectly styled despite the chase, his suit immaculate. He looked exactly as she remembered, handsome, charming, and utterly without conscience. "There's my brilliant doctor." He smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "You remember now. I can see it in your face." "I remember everything." Her voice was steady, surprising herself. The prisoners screaming as their memories were torn apart. The test subjects who never recovered. The congressman's wife who knew too much about the weapons contracts. Victor's smile faltered slightly. "Necessary sacrifices for the greater good. Your technology will save thousands of lives by preventing conflicts before they start. Imagine enemy agents who forget their missions, terrorists who lose their ideology, dissidents who simply stop caring about their cause." Marcus had gone silent, but Sarah could feel him out there in the darkness, waiting for his moment. "You're talking about mind control," she said, "erasing people's fundamental selves. I'm talking about peace through superior technology. Your technology." Sarah reached into her jacket pocket, feeling the weight of the device Marcus had given her, a dead man's switch connected to enough explosives to level the building. If she died, if her heart stopped, the warehouse would become their tomb. "There's just one problem with your plan," she said, pulling out the device so Victor could see it. "I've already corrupted the base research, changed the fundamental equations. What's left in my memory is worthless, designed to scramble the subject's brain permanently." Victor's composure cracked. "You're bluffing. Test me." The standoff stretched between them, tension crackling like electricity. Sarah could see Victor calculating odds, weighing the value of her knowledge against the risk of losing everything. Then Marcus struck from behind, his blade finding the first operative's throat before the man could scream. The second operative spun, firing wildly into the darkness as Victor dove for cover. Sarah smiled grimly and squeezed the trigger. The abandoned warehouse felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah pressed her back against the cold concrete wall, listening to Marcus's labored breathing beside her. 3 hours had passed since they'd escaped the hotel, and the silence outside was almost worse than the chaos they'd left behind. "They'll find us here eventually," Marcus whispered, checking his phone for the 100th time. Still no signal. The dead zone Dr. Chen had mentioned stretched further than they'd hoped. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to push past the fog that clouded her memories. The fragments were coming faster now, sharper. She could see faces, scientists in white coats, herself among them, a laboratory, equations on whiteboards, and blood. So much blood. "I remember the night it happened," she said suddenly. "The night they tried to kill me." Marcus turned, his eyes reflecting what little moonlight filtered through the grimy windows. "What do you see?" "Dr. Vance. He was there when I discovered the real purpose of the program. We weren't developing memory enhancement technology for PTSD patients." Her voice cracked. "We were creating weapons, human weapons who could forget their own identities, their moral constraints, perfect soldiers who could be programmed and reprogrammed without conscience." The weight of it settled between them like a physical presence. Marcus had suspected, but hearing it confirmed felt like a punch to the gut. "The test subjects," Sarah continued, "they were veterans, homeless veterans who wouldn't be missed. They promised them treatment, housing, a chance to rebuild their lives. Instead, they erased who they were entirely." Jesus! Marcus clenched his fists. "How many?" "Dozens. Maybe more." "I tried to stop it, tried to expose what Blackwater was really doing. That's when Vance decided I was a liability." She touched the scar on her temple. "They made it look like an accident, but something went wrong. Instead of dying, I lost my memories, became one of their own test subjects." A sound outside made them both freeze. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving with military precision around the building's perimeter. Marcus grabbed Sarah's hand. "Back exit. Now." They moved through the shadows, stepping carefully around debris and broken glass. The footsteps grew closer, and Sarah could hear voices now, clipped, professional commands being whispered into radios. "Movement on the east side. Thermal imaging shows 2 targets, 2nd floor. Copy that. Moving to intercept." Marcus pulled Sarah behind a stack of rotting crates, just as tactical lights swept through the windows above them. The beams cut through the darkness like searchlights, probing every corner. "There's something else," Sarah breathed into his ear. "The program isn't finished. Dr. Chen wasn't lying about the kill switch, but there's more. They're planning something bigger, a field test. Where?" Before she could answer, the warehouse exploded into chaos. Smoke canisters crashed through the windows, filling the air with thick grey clouds. Shouts echoed from multiple directions as tactical teams poured through every entrance. Marcus hauled Sarah to her feet, his military training kicking in. He'd been ambushed before, knew the signs of a coordinated assault. They had maybe 30 seconds before the net closed completely. "This way," he hissed, leading her toward a section of wall where the concrete had cracked and crumbled. Beyond it, he could see the faint outline of an adjacent building. They squeezed through the gap just as the first tactical team reached their hiding spot. Shouts erupted behind them, followed by the sound of heavy boots on concrete. The next building was older, more decrepit. Parts of the floor had collapsed, creating a maze of broken beams and twisted metal. They climbed down into what had once been a basement, then through a tunnel that connected to the city's storm drain system. The water was ankle-deep and ice-cold. Sarah shivered as they splashed through the darkness, following the weak beam of Marcus's phone flashlight. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter, but never disappeared entirely. "The field test," Marcus said as they paused at a junction in the tunnels. "Tell me about the field test." Sarah wiped water from her face, her breath coming in visible puffs. "A shopping mall, Christmas Eve. They're going to activate multiple subjects simultaneously. Make it look like a terrorist attack, but really it's a demonstration for potential buyers." The horror of it hit Marcus like a physical blow. Innocent families, children, all becoming casualties in a weapons demonstration. When? Which mall? I don't know. The memory is fragmented, but it's soon. Very soon. She grabbed his arm. We have to stop them, Marcus. We're the only ones who know. A distant splash echoed through the tunnel behind them. Their pursuers had found the entrance. Marcus checked his phone again. Still no signal, but according to the GPS, they were moving toward the downtown area, toward civilization, and hopefully toward help. Then we better move fast, he said, and they plunged deeper into the darkness, racing against time and the shadows that followed. The safe house felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus checked his watch for the fourth time in 10 minutes, 3:47 a.m. Sarah sat across from him at the kitchen table, her fingers wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, staring at nothing. The weight of what they'd uncovered pressed down on them both like a physical thing. We can't stay here much longer, Marcus said quietly. They'll find us eventually. Sarah nodded without looking up. I keep thinking about Dr. Chen, about what they did to him because he tried to help me. Her voice was barely a whisper. How many people have died because of what's in my head? Before Marcus could answer, Agent Torres appeared in the doorway, her phone pressed to her ear. Her face was grim. Yes, sir, I understand. She ended the call and looked at them both. We need to move. Now. What happened? Marcus was already on his feet. Castellanos is dead. Found in his hotel room an hour ago. Made to look like a heart attack, but my contact says there were signs of struggle. Torres grabbed her jacket from a chair. They're cleaning house, which means... The sound of breaking glass from the front of the house cut her off. Marcus's military instincts kicked in immediately. He grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her toward the back door as Torres drew her weapon. Go, Torres hissed. There's a car in the alley behind the garage. Keys are under the driver's seat. Marcus didn't give Sarah time to argue. He pulled her through the kitchen, past the mudroom, and out into the cold night air. Behind them, he could hear voices, too many voices, professional, coordinated. They sprinted across the small backyard, Sarah stumbling once on the uneven ground. Marcus caught her, kept her moving. The garage loomed ahead of them, a dark rectangle against the slightly lighter sky. The car was there, an old Honda that looked like it had seen better decades. Marcus felt under the seat, found the keys, and had the engine running before Sarah had fully closed her door. Where are we going? She asked as he backed out of the alley without headlights. Away from here first. Then, the crack of gunfire from the house made them both flinch. Marcus floored the accelerator. They drove in tense silence for 20 minutes. Marcus taking random turns, doubling back, using every evasion technique he'd learned in the army. Finally, when he was reasonably sure they weren't being followed, he pulled into an all-night diner parking lot. I'm remembering more, Sarah said suddenly. Not everything, but pieces. There was a lab, underground. I wasn't the only test subject. She closed her eyes, pressing her fingers to her temples. Children, Marcus. They were experimenting on children. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. What kind of experiments? Memory manipulation, behavioral modification. They were trying to create... She struggled with the words, weapons. Human weapons who could be programmed and controlled. Her eyes opened, meeting his. I think I was one of their successes. Until something went wrong. The pieces clicked together in Marcus's mind with horrible clarity. You escaped. That's why you had no memory when I found you. They'd wiped you clean, but the process was interrupted. And now they want me back. Or dead. Sarah's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the fear in her eyes. The data I was carrying, it wasn't just about the financial corruption. It was about the program. Evidence of what they were doing. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Torres is alive. Safe house compromised. They have the flash drive. Meet at original location. Come alone. He showed Sarah the message. It could be a trap. Probably is, she agreed. But if Torres is alive, we need to help her. And if they have the drive... She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what it meant. Marcus started the engine again. The original location had to mean the park where he'd first found Sarah. It felt like a lifetime ago, though it had been less than a week. As they drove through the empty streets, Sarah reached over and took his hand. "Whatever happens tonight, I want you to know, finding you saved me. Not just from them, but from being lost forever." Marcus squeezed her fingers. "We're going to get through this. We're going to expose what they did, and then you're going to remember who you really are." "I'm not sure I want to remember," she said quietly. "What if the person I was before was someone I don't want to be?" The park appeared ahead of them, dark and seemingly empty. Marcus could see the bench where he'd first found Sarah, could almost see the ghost of that frightened woman who'd offered to cook him a meal. Now they were about to find out if that simple act of kindness would cost them everything. The warehouse smelled of rust and abandonment, but to Marcus it felt like sanctuary. 3 days had passed since they'd escaped the underground facility, and Sarah's memories were returning in fragments, disjointed pieces of a puzzle that painted an increasingly horrifying picture. Marcus set down 2 cups of coffee. The bitter brew a poor substitute for Sarah's cooking, but it would have to do. "The same protocol they used on you? The irony isn't lost on me." Sarah's laugh held no humor. "I created the technology to help veterans with PTSD recover suppressed memories. Instead, they weaponized it to steal minds, to create perfect sleeper agents who wouldn't even know what they were." The files revealed the scope of Meridian's operation, dozens of subjects, all people society wouldn't miss. Homeless veterans, undocumented immigrants, psychiatric patients. Sarah had discovered the truth and tried to expose it, but Director Hayes had been one step ahead. "They didn't just try to erase your memory," Marcus realized, reading over her shoulder. "They were going to implant someone else's entirely, turn you into their asset." Rebecca Chen. Sarah pulled up a photo of an Asian woman in military dress. Special forces, killed in action 3 years ago. They preserved her neural patterns, her training, her complete psychological profile. I was going to become her. Marcus felt sick. The casual cruelty of it, the complete disregard for human identity, reminded him why he'd lost faith in the system he'd once served. But something went wrong. The procedure was interrupted. A fire in the lab. I set it myself as a failsafe, though I don't remember doing it. In the chaos, I escaped, but the memory suppression was only partial. That's why fragments kept breaking through. Outside, a car engine rumbled to life. Marcus moved to the window, peering through grimy glass at the empty street. Nothing seemed out of place, but his instincts screamed danger. They'd stayed in one location too long. "We need to move," he said. But Sarah wasn't listening. She'd gone rigid, staring at something on the screen. "Marcus." Her voice was barely audible. "There are others, active assets, people walking around right now who don't know they're not themselves." The list was shorter than Marcus had feared, but longer than he'd hoped. Names, locations, mission parameters. A congressman in Washington, a federal judge in California, a tech CEO in Silicon Valley. All of them replacement personalities implanted in stolen bodies. "This goes deeper than Hayes," Sarah said. "Look at the funding sources." Marcus scanned the financial records, shell companies, offshore accounts, but one name appeared repeatedly: Blackstone Dynamics, a private military contractor with ties to the intelligence community. They're not just stealing identities, Marcus realized. They're placing their people in positions of power. A new sound reached them, the subtle click of a door being tested. Marcus grabbed the laptop and their emergency bag while Sarah quickly downloaded the files to a secure drive. "Back exit," he whispered, leading her toward the rear of the warehouse. But as they approached the loading dock, shadows moved beyond the frosted windows. They were surrounded. "Dr. Vasquez," the voice echoed through the warehouse, amplified and distorted. "You've caused considerable trouble, but we're prepared to offer you a choice." Marcus positioned himself between Sarah and the main entrance, his hand finding the grip of his pistol. They had maybe 6 rounds left. "Surrender now, and we'll ensure your transition is painless. You'll wake up as Rebecca Chen, a decorated soldier with a bright future. Your current suffering will be nothing but a bad dream. Sarah's hand found Marcus's shoulder. They're right, you know. As Elena Vasquez, I'll always be running, but as Rebecca, don't. Marcus turned to face her. You are not your memories or your name. You're the person who chose to help a stranger, who fought to protect the innocent, even when you didn't remember why. That's who you really are. Through the windows, Marcus counted at least 8 tactical figures taking positions, professional movements, military precision. This wasn't Hayes and his corrupt agents. This was Blackstone's cleanup crew. Final offer, Doctor. Surrender or we'll take you by force, and your friend won't survive the experience. Sarah looked at the laptop, then at Marcus, and something shifted in her expression. The uncertainty that had haunted her since losing her memory crystallized into resolve. I know what we have to do, she said quietly, but you're not going to like it. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Sarah was moving toward the main entrance, the laptop clutched against her chest like armor. I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the warehouse. And I remember everything.